All right, we are live from Occupy City Hall in Rockford, Illinois. My name is Leslie Roth. I am a member of the May 30th Alliance. Oh, we got some dirt bikes going out here. All right, all right. What's up? What's up? All right. It is July 22nd, 2021. I think that we're gonna start off this gonna start this live off the way we start off all the lives. But I think in general the plan for today is to have a general discussion about some of the things that have happened in the city recently and about the implications that those things have. And last week, me and Antar, we had more of a specific topic guidelines that we were running through, and today it's going to be more of just sort of in general talking about a few different things and letting the dialogue and the conversation go where it organically evolves to. So before we hop into that, I want to say we came out here and began the occupation at City Hall on October 3rd, 2020, after on October 2nd, 2020, Tyrus Jones, an unarmed black man, was shot by Rockford Police Department officer Dominic McNeese while he was running away. Our occupation continued through the end of November when Officer Dominic McNeese will be found to be justified in the shooting of the unarmed black man Tyrus Jones. Our occupation continued through January 5th, 2021, when Denzel Duvant was beat at the hands of the Rockford Police Department. One of the officers involved in that assault of Denzel Duvant was Officer Dominic McNeese, who just months prior shot and attempted to murder Tyrus Jones. Our occupation continued through April 10th, 2021, when Faustin Guaitigo was murdered inside of his home by Winnebago County Sheriff Deputy Joseph Brulard. Our occupation continued when no more than 24 hours later, Jose Gonzalez Jr. was shot by Rockford Police Department officer Owen McGinnis while he was running away. Our occupation continued through April 25th, 2021, when Raymond Jackson died after a high-speed pursuit took place on the streets of Rockford, Illinois. And our occupation has continued to this day of July 22nd, 2021, while three of those cases that we just outlined, the case of Faustin Guaitigo, Jose Gonzalez Jr., and the case of Raymond Jackson, are all currently under investigation by the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force. And it should be noted that the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force has found every act of police violence to be justified, every in-custody death to be justified, and so we do not doubt that anything different will come out once they do give out the rulings into the investigation into the shooting of Jose Gonzalez Jr., the murder of Faustin Guaitigo, and the high-speed pursuit that led to the death of Raymond Jackson. So we want to say justice for Tyrus Jones, justice for Denzel Duvant, justice for Jose Gonzalez Jr., justice for Faustin Guaitigo, and justice for Raymond Jackson. And we regularly outline all five of those incidents because we understand there may be some people who don't have empathy for all five of them. They may only have empathy for one of the situations or for two of the situations. And it becomes our duty to identify the empathy that they have for whichever specific situation that it is, and to extrapolate how each one of these things are directly and indirectly connected to each other, and how we cannot advocate for justice for Raymond Jackson without advocating for justice for Tyrus Jones, how we cannot advocate for justice for Jose Gonzalez Jr. without advocating for justice for Denzel Duvant, and how we cannot advocate for justice for Faustin Guaitigo without advocating for justice for all the individuals involved. And then so I have Antar here with me on Thursdays. This is it's going to be one of the things that we're trying to work regularly into the schedule. So I'll let Antar do a few introductions, and then we'll start bouncing the topics off each other.
Yeah, my name is Antar. I'm a resident of Rockford, Illinois, and I experienced May 30th in Rockford after, during the George Floyd protests. It's been a year ago, and so we've just been trying to raise awareness here in Rockford, and that's what we're trying to awaken ourselves and other people to the fierce urgency of now in terms of addressing the issues of police terrorism, racial discrimination, and mass incarceration. And so
Yeah, we And I think that's when I guess we can start the conversation off here too. That's one of the things when you came down here, you spoke to me about the fierce urgency of now. Hey, what's up? What's up? How you doing? You spoke to me about those things. Give me one. We in the middle of a live. We just started up this live, so we just going.
Hey, it's the John Lewis Protection from the Police Act.
There you go. There we go. Take it easy. It's good seeing you. I think one of the things that's one of the things that you said when you first came down here is the fierce urgency of now, and speaking about the multiple times in which Dr. King spoke about those and or used that statement in speeches that he was giving. And I do think that is something that has exemplified what it is that we felt the need to do here as an organization. And that is not putting off something until a month or putting something off until 2 or 3 months or waiting for the next time that an election came up or waiting for the next time that some specific incident came up, treating each and every day as if the actions we can take today will fix this problem, will solve this problem, with the understanding that, that is not possible for any action to be taken today to fix it, but that does not deter us from having that type of a mindset. I think I once had a teacher that told me, live like you'll die today and plan like you'll live forever. And I think that's one of the things that I have sort of brought over to my personal mindset about these things that's going on here, and that is to to be out here active in the streets as if tomorrow we're going to be able to fix this problem, as if we make enough noise, if we garner enough attention, if we stir the consciousness up enough, in 24-hour period, tomorrow everybody's mindset will be changed. Everybody will be looking at these things differently if we make the right actions. But also planning as if this will be something that lasts forever. This is a struggle that'll never end. And so we have to have objectives and end goals that are 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, and continue. But finding the right balance between both of those things. And so when you came down here and you spoke that was one of the thoughts that I initially had from that. And so I think it's important that you expound upon some of the thoughts and the concepts that, that statement sort of arises for you.
Yeah, I think one of the things I think that the young people, and one of the things that the whole thing about language and fuck the police has brought up is that there is, I don't know if it's just a generation gap where we have young people that's saying like, no, what's happening right now, we can't tolerate it. We can't, wait 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Not to say that, things will not take time, but we can't sit as if things are okay or that things are moving in a way that justifies us not being urgent, and understand how urgent it is when youth are being shot in the street. We don't have any time to waste, basically. And so that's what that is. I'll just read the quote here from Dr. King. I believe this was in Why We Can't Wait. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, I'll start over once this emergency Okay. Quote says, we are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action. And I think that's the thing, not really the language, but I think some people are taken back or shocked or don't know how to respond to people saying, no, it's an urgency. Black lives being taken, state-sponsored terrorism, killing black, state-sponsored murder of black people. That is a reason to be outside of City Hall indefinitely. And so we have to ask ourselves, where do we stand? What are we willing to sacrifice? Like, I don't know if I told you, like, I did this for myself. I encourage other people to do this. So one of the things that happens when a national story about police-sponsored terrorism or murder or some egregious racial tension or a situation, something that happens, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to react. Or there's this thing about reactionaries or not being a reactionary. And that's one of the things you said. By being down here, we're not going to be reactionary. We're engaged in this revolutionary action, from this point on. So we're not reacting. We're not reacting to the things that happen. I forgot my thought where I was going with that. What was that?
You were saying that that's what being bothered by the action that people are taking, less about the language. You saying
Oh yeah.
the story.
So
Things you did yourself.
if things are urgent, and like I said, we'll get into this more, but racism, white supremacy, which means one of the ways I like to define racism is minority rule. But racism, white supremacy is a pandemic that has been affecting and killing black people way before COVID. In fact, I would say the majority of black deaths. All right. Some of the deaths classified as a result of COVID could easily be said that the cause really was racism, white supremacy. But we'll get back to that. So each person can take a look at one of their days, a 24-hour day, 24 hours. Count the hours in which you do certain activities, and calculate how many hours you spend working to address the issue of police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial discrimination, like where you're directly engaged in the action to combat those things. How many hours you spend? 8 hours, 5 to 7 hours sleep. You spend most people spend another 8, 10 to 12 hours working. And then another 2 hours in prep for work or coming home back and forth. Another hour eating, hygiene or whatever. So if you're not spending, like we have some young people that are demonstrating, spending 20 plus hours, if not 24 hours, engaged in action to address these issues that we're talking about. And that's the type of sense of urgency that we need. And I think that's what bothers people. That usually, the basketball, work, or not just basketball, sports, work, whatever the things that draw us away from addressing these issues, people are used to those distractions being able to take people off guard. And I'm happy. That's why, I support and do all that I can with the May 30th Alliance, because I think that it's a demonstration of the urgency of now when black lives are being lost. Rather it's so-called black on black violence or state-sponsored violence, if we're really serious about addressing those issues, we have to deal with it with urgent action. One death is too many. One black youth shot dead in the street is too many. It's enough that we don't have time to do a lot of the things that we do, and myself included.
No, yeah, I agree. I think that that was one of the things that I feel like as these things have evolved in the city, as the struggle against police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice has evolved in the city over the past 12 to 14 months, one of the things that has happened is we've tried to figure out with the amount of numbers which we have, with the realistic amount of numbers, realistic amount of finances, with the realistic position that we're in right now, what things can be done that can be effective. And we found out that we don't have enough people right now to march in the streets, and marching in the streets to be an effective thing. We found that out towards this time last year when City Market was going on, and we were no longer being able to get 200. We couldn't get 200 and 300 people to be at City Market like how we could get to be at the die-ins. But we found that with 15 to 20 people, we could walk in a crosswalk, and we could have we could still be effective. And then we found the same thing with, even though we may not be able to get 200 people at any particular City Market, we can be effective by just continuing to go to City Market on a weekly basis. And then past City Market, once the occupation began, the initial reason that May 30th Alliance as an organization felt that this was something that was imperative to do, to be outside of City Hall, to stay outside of City Hall, especially at the time in which we began, which was in October, with a little bit with cold, with the weather being colder than it is in the spring or the summer, was that we felt the day when Tyrus Jones got shot on October 2nd, that night, it was not Ferguson, it was not Minneapolis, it was not things that you may have seen in other places where a bunch of people took to the streets to look for answers or to get answers or to make sure that the entire world knew about what was going on. There was a small amount of people who were outside of District 1 looking for answers. There was online, there was more of an outcry, but it still was not anything similar to what had happened earlier in the year when George Floyd was murdered. And so we figured, as an organization, we thought to ourselves, what is it that we can do with the amount of people that we have that can be effective? And one of the things that we have found in the effectiveness is the repeated action, the continued action of doing something that may not be a big deal for 12 hours or for 24 hours becomes effective and becomes a bigger deal after a week or after 2 weeks or after 5 weeks, after 10 weeks. And the same thing, is, I say to, one of the metaphors that I've used in the beginning of this was, if flies in the house, in your house for a day, it might not cause that big of a deal or big of an issue for you. But if that same fly, or if you think it's that same fly, keep flying around day in after day, and you can't never catch it, you can't never kill it, you can't never get rid of it, even if it's just this one fly, it can be effective enough to the point where you forget about everything that's going on in your house and you only focus on how to get rid of this fly. And so I think that that's one of the things that we have found with the memorials, one of the things we found with the chalk, one of the things that we found by our presence outside of City Hall, and then even one of the things that we found with creating content and putting content out is that the repetitive action of all of these things can become is very effective. And not only is the repetitive action effective, but the doing it right now in the moment, not saying we're going to do it in a week or in 2 weeks, or not trying to plan for a year from now to be able to do it. But the moment that Tyrus Jones was shot, within 24 hours, we came out here and we stayed here and we figured out everything else as we continued, And I think that that's one of the things we have to always get to is that you don't always have to have the end goal. You don't always have to have what the finish line looks like. The problem that we are facing, in my opinion, is that it's not enough people beginning to run the race. It's not that we don't have people getting to the finish line or people don't know what the finish line looks like. We don't have enough people in the process of the race for us to get to the finish line. And so I think that one of the things that we have learned to do is being okay with the fact that some people may disagree with our methods or our tactics because they don't see an end goal with these methods or tactics, or because they don't understand the methods or tactics. We're okay with that as long as we are implementing these methods and tactics in some type of a manner. And so that's sort of another one of my thoughts that I have about how what you're saying and the concept that you're talking about, how we have sort of tried to apply that to what it is that we're doing out here. And then we've spoken about this. I guess maybe we've spoken about this slightly. This is a small switch of subjects, change of topic. But we are in the process of a new police chief getting ready to be picked here in Rockford, Illinois. I believe that the sheriff's I know the Boone County sheriff has an election that's coming up. I'm not sure if the Winnebago County Sheriff has an election coming up anytime soon. But I'm bringing these things up to say that one of the things that we do want to have a regular conversation about and a regular dialogue about is the hiring of the new police chief, is the things that go into the hiring of the new police chief, is the implications that whoever the new police chief has on us as a community. And so I think that without going into any specifics about any of the candidates, or without going into any type of experience that we've had with the candidates, I think that the main thing that I would say about this search for a new police chief and the manner in which they're going about it is that it is very removed from the community that will be directly affected by whoever this new police chief is. It's very obvious that this is not something that is being done in coordination with the community that this police chief is going to be. I guess, I don't want to say a part of. It's not necessarily a part of. It's doubtful that the police chief is going to live in the community. But whoever this police chief is, his actions will have a direct impact on the people in the community. And I don't believe that it's been a true effort to involve the community in this search. I remember one time it was me and you talking. You were talking to me about how it was a city. I don't know if you said if it was Chicago or it was a city where they brought the community in and the community asked questions to the police chief. I don't know if maybe it was me and you talking about this. Maybe it was me and somebody else that was speaking about it. It might have been Kay. But somebody was talking about the community asking questions of the people who were signing up or who are advocating to be the police chief, who are looking for the position of the police chief. And I do think that one of the things that happened today was Bob Babcock did speaking beforehand, and he spoke about how whoever the new police chief was needed to be connected with the issues that go on in the city, needed to understand the fact that at least one person, on average, one person have been. These are his words. I think that the average might be higher than one person. I believe the average is about two either in custody deaths or police shootings happen on average a year here. But he spoke about how whoever became the new police chief needed to understand those things and understand how specifically these issues affect Rockford, Illinois. And I don't believe that there has been any type of effort to do those things. Even the questionnaires that they're about getting ready to have, they're going to have like a interview basically thing where people who won't be in person, it'll be online, it'll be via Zoom basically, will give questions, and then they'll decipher which questions that they'll ask, and then they'll ask these candidates these questions. And I do think that again feeds back into this problem of real people not being able to address the real problems that they have, and not being able to get a real response. These are all real orchestrated things that are being set up. What's up? And so I say all those things to, I guess, sort of ask you, not if you don't, it doesn't need to be anything specific about these specific candidates, but when you hear about a new police chief coming into Rockford, and you've had some type of experience in the past with the police terrorism situations and mass incarceration and racial injustice, and there's no way to, the same way the state's attorney is directly connected with those issues is the same way the chief of police and the mayor are directly connected with those issues. So when you see the way that they're going about hiring a police chief, when you think about ways that maybe you've heard in the past of police chiefs being hired, what are just some of your thoughts on the process, the position, the community of Rockford when it comes to this specific topic?
All right, a few things. One, I think that the people who showed the most disgust or the most the strongest reaction to the George Floyd protest, these people were, or the people that stayed out the longest, or continued to protest the longer. Not the marches that was like one day and it was sort of, whatever it was, but Portland, New York, or Seattle, or some of these places, Rockford. I believe that those people are calling for bigger changes than a police chief. Right. Although, like I said, if a new police chief can stop even one person from being killed by the police, if the police chief can stop even one more incident of mass incarceration, racial discrimination, and within the purview of his or her job description, then I would hope that person would get in office. But the other thing is, the report that just came out about the Rockford Public Schools being like one of the least Something about the educational attainment of the school district being one of the worst in the country. That shows you right there that the majority of the people in Rockford can't be involved in an intelligent, informed way. And I know that the people, the politicians, the people that run the businesses and corporations here, they know that. They know they're dealing with a population that has been miseducated, undereducated. And that's a sad situation, because if you know that in order for a citizen to participate in democracy fully, they have to be well informed, and you know that the majority of the people in your city is not informed, then you know that like you said, it's a small minority of people that are making these decisions. And that's why I said you can look at racism, white supremacy as minority rule. I think white people are like 10% or less of the world's population. And racism is based on the justification of that 10% ruling everyone else, of creating a notion that, 10% or less of the world's population is supposed to control most of the world's resources. It's supposed to be able to go to another country and search for weapons. Those same countries can't come search for weapons in America or in Europe. So I think that's what one of the things I think is that we know, based on the educational level of the citizens in Rockford, that the majority of people in Rockford don't have nothing to do with nothing that's going on. That's a minority. 11% of the people help put the latest city council in office. And I don't see any efforts to change that happening now. I don't see any mass political education classes happening, to change that dynamic. And so, until that dynamic changes, it'll continue to be minority rule here, here in Rockford, minority. And we can even see that when, like we were talking before, the families of the victims of police terrorism in Rockford, the families of Faustin Guetigo, the family of Jose Gonzalez, the families of Mike Sago Jr., the families of Demetrius Bennett, Logan Bell, Kerry Blake, they come down here. This has become the refuge for them. There's no civil rights organization. There's no anti-racism organization in Rockford that provides refuge. And these are more systematic organizations. These are official. These are organizations that's recognized by the city. These are organizations that's receiving grants or have been contracted to educate corporations and public entities about education. Yet the people most affected by education don't feel comfortable or have not received haven't felt the vibe, but they must don't like the vibe of some of these official organizations, because they come down here. Their refuge is down here at Occupy Rockford. And so we know that the majority of the people, the poor people in Rockford, black people in Rockford, do not have advocacy within City Hall. They do not have representation in City Hall. They do not have representation in the state's attorney's office. If they did, they would be down there. The family of Kerry Blake, Michael Sago, their refuge wouldn't be May 30th Alliance. Their refuge would be the city, the city council. Those are their representatives, the city council, these different entities. So that's why, until the educational dynamic changes in Rockford, and that goes to say, do the powers that be, or the people that profit off of the current situation in Rockford, the current racist power structure in Rockford, do they want it to change? They don't want, if 75 to 80% of the people in Rockford voted for city council, 90% of the people that's in office now wouldn't be in office.
No, that's 100%. I agree with that 100%. This is, while you were speaking, I just pulled up the news story This is a story from WREX. So I'll read the story and then I'll say the ranking where Rockford ranks, and then we can continue to have a conversation off of this. So this is okay. So I'll read this. When it comes to education, Rockford ranks almost last in the country. Wallet Hub released a new study of 2021's most and least educated cities. Rockford's ranking was 130 out of 150 metropolitan areas. It measures cities on 11 metrics like the percentage of residents with diplomas, gender and race education gaps, and percentage of residents with college degrees. Quote, without having seen the survey or not being able to speak to the metrics, I don't know what they did or didn't value, end quote, says Rockford Public Schools Superintendent Erin Jarrett. Quote, what we're focused on in our community here is graduation rate, literacy, and numeracy, end quote. Here are the top and bottom cities for education according to Wallet Hub's study. 1 was Ann Arbor, Michigan. 2 was San Jose, California. 3 was Washington, D.C. 4 was San Francisco. And 5 was Madison, Wisconsin. The bottom 5, 146 was Modesto, California. 147 was Bakersfield, California. 148 was McAllen, Texas. 149 was Brownsville, Texas. And then 150 was Visalia, California. And again, Rockford ranked at 130 out of 150. Came in right below Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and right above Mobile, Alabama. And again, I'm not sure. Here, let's read how they describe these rankings. Here, we're gonna read how Wallet Hub described these rankings, and maybe that'll shed a little bit more light. Cities want to attract highly educated workers to fuel their economic growth and tax revenues. Higher levels of education tend to lead to higher salaries. Plus, the more that graduates earn, the more tax dollars they contribute over time, according to the Economic Policy Institute. In turn, educated people want to live somewhere where they will get a good return on their educational investment. People also tend to marry others of the same educational level, which means that cities that already have a large educated population may be more attractive to people with degrees. Not all highly educated people will flock to the same areas, though. Some may prefer to have many people with similar education levels around them for socializing and career connections. Others may want to be a big fish in a little pond. Not every city will provide the same quality of life to those with higher education either. In addition, the most educated cities could shift in the near future depending on how well cities deal with the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact it has had on schooling. In fact, more than 97% of educators report seeing learning loss among their students due to the pandemic. To determine where the most educated Americans are putting their degrees to work, Wallet Hub compared the 150 largest metropolitan statistical areas, or MSAs, across 11 key metrics. Our data set ranges from the share of adults aged 25 and older with a bachelor's degree or higher, to the quality of the public school system, to the gender education gap. So this seems like this was a lot of things were taken into this, which is more than just the school district or things of that nature. So I think one of the things that without being able to go through and look at each one of these specifically, I think one of the questions I would have is what do other statistics look like for some of these cities? If Rockford is one of the 150 most metropolitan cities in the country, where do we rank when it comes to some of these other things that are happening? And then the cities that do rank higher, the places that do rank higher, what things have happened there, and what things are going on there that may be different than what's going on here in Rockford. I think that anybody that's been here in Rockford, or anybody that's spoken to people here in Rockford, from the beginning of my involvement in these protests and demonstrations, people that I've spoken to who have been involved in social justice issues in Rockford in one way or another have always spoken about the educational system here, the lawsuit against the educational system here, the racial discrimination that goes on in the educational system here. So this is not a secret or some type of hidden thing about Rockford. I think that that's one of the things that I found the most interesting, is that some of these things that maybe be it, albeit because of maybe me being younger or me being removed, some of these things that that other places may hide aren't really hidden here in Rockford. You know, the same thing is with the police terrorism, with these police shootings, that as much as they do sweep them under the rug, they're not necessarily hiding these police shootings or hiding the fact that that the police here are racist or that the police here violate people's rights. You know, if you know some of the other cities that we've looked through, it's been harder to find information about. It's been harder to find stories about. But here there are, you know, the information. Yeah, that is true. You know. But here, it has been one of those things where you can find the stories written, and you can, you know, even when if we was just to speak about the things that have happened here, when Tyrus Jones was shot, there was not some type of concerted effort to hide the issue of shooting black people here. There was not like this campaign to make it seem like, oh, this isn't something that we do here. This is some type of an aberration. You know, that's not what happened. They just went through the motion of the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force. They cleared it. They sent the officer right back to work. When Denzel Duvant was beat and was assaulted, there was no investigation into Denzel Duvant being beat. When May 30th happened and people got beat up and was assaulted on video camera with pictures and all these things online, they didn't say that one of these police officers was going to be reprimanded or say that some type of vast change was going to happen. I mean, we sit here 13, 14 months removed from the first time that the mayor said something about body cameras, and all the police here still don't even have body cameras, and multiple police shootings have happened. And so I say that to say that even the issue of police terrorism is not secreted here. The same thing about the Justice Center and mass incarceration. I don't know how it will be a way to tangibly figure this out, but I would have to imagine that a very large percentage of jobs have some type of connection with the Justice Center here. And then the same thing, I would imagine that when they built the Justice Center here, which was not that long ago, that there were financial implications in that they used that as to say, well, this is going to bring jobs here. This is going to bring income and revenue here. And so I say all those things to say that these issues of miseducation are not hidden in Rockford. These things are out in the forefront. The moment that the federal government stopped having control of the school district here, they went and reverted back to all the things that they did before. They didn't wait 5 years or 10 years to try to keep it a secret or to do it secretively. They did it right out in the open. And so I think that one of the things that we've been trying to do is to force people to have this conversation consistently, to force people to be more informed about it, to be more educated about it, since it is so much out in the open, so that way we can combat it better. And so when I guess those are some of my thoughts that I have from reading this. When you read this and you hear about Rockford being ranked as one of the most least educated cities, and with whatever experience you've had with the miseducation of people in this city, what are some more of your thoughts about the rankings and about just miseducation in the city in general?
Well, a couple things. First, you said the name of the superintendent, Aaron Jarrett, and I remember he took over after it might have been an interim person, but basically right after Dr. Sheffield, black superintendent who came in, and racial tensions were flying high, you know, then. And even before that there had been grassroots organizations going down to the school board, protesting issues, speaking out against the injustices in the school district. And one I think the superintendent gave his state of the school district address, and he said that everything must be fine because people are quiet. You know, so that is just a little side note to why we can't be quiet about these issues, because even though they're still making these lists, right, he said that everything must be good, and he's been in office. They've been making these lists consistently. You know, an article came out that said Rockford had basically reverted back to segregated schools that put them in, basically made them illegal, right, you know, according to Brown versus Board of Education. But I want to say, give a an example on how and why I can say that racism, white supremacy, minority rule is at the heart of why Rockford ranks here. I saw in the comments below this story, some people were saying, well, if the kids don't want to learn or crime, or they were talking about symptomatology, all of these symptoms and things. But one interesting thing about Rockford, and I think Rockford is unique. I know it's not the only place, but think about this. What city can you go to that has more private high schools than public? The miseducation of majority black people in Rockford Public Schools is big business. It helps to generate businesses for private schools. We have Rockford Christian, Christian Life, Rockford Lutheran, Rockford Boylan, Keith Country Day, and some other ones. I ride different places and find different high schools tucked back in the woods somewhere. And all of these schools, for the most part, are located in high income areas. And as you said, because they keep the population uneducated and miseducated, no one thinks that, hold on, why are these so-called Christian private schools located in some of the highest income areas in the city when they're supposed to be serving the poor and the fatherless, the afflicted and needy? It would be interesting to see how much money these private schools are making per year. And then we have to ask ourselves, why are so many parents putting their children in private schools in Rockford? What's the purpose of them? First, it started with just flat out racism. After Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, go research the founding date of all of the private schools in Rockford. And so if the public schools are destabilized, and not only do the private schools benefits, but the surrounding towns. I think they said at one point Hananiga High School had 90% of their graduating seniors went on to college. So if I have a choice between Rockford and a high school where 98% of the kids go to college, I would be looking to build a home in Rockton. And so a lot of people benefit and make money off of the poor educational system in Rockford. Corporations. I remember at one point the school board in Rockford was made up of mostly of business owners, many of which never went to Rockford Public Schools, neither had children in Rockford Public Schools, but were making decisions about what the curriculum was going to be and what the educational process was going to be for the workers, basically. Yeah, they're the factory workers, It was West High School, and this was in the lawsuit, in the transcript somewhere. West High School was notorious for the counselors telling black children and others, I would imagine, that they weren't college material. You shouldn't be thinking or pursuing college. You're destined to be a factory worker, basically. So I think of that number one, that this report about Rockford, don't let nobody tell you different, is rooted in racism, the false concept of white supremacy, which means minority rule. A minority, if white children make up the minority of children in Rockford Public Schools, why are white people the majority on the school board?
I was trying to. I'll go look through that later. But one of the things that I was thinking about as you talked about the school board or the people that were making these decisions not being from Rockford or having children that went to, or even having children that are inside the Rockford public school system, and how they are making these decisions about people who, how they're making these decisions about issues that they neither were there to know what the issue was like themselves as children in the school district, or sending children to these school districts. Makes me think about the fact that, and again, I want to point this out too. When you say that when you give the reasons that people will be incentivized to live outside of Rockford, and then to send their children to the schools that are outside of Rockford, to have their homes outside of Rockford because of those opportunities, it makes me think of the fact that 80% of the police officers here also don't live inside of Rockford and don't live in this area, but they come here to work. They come here to garner wages and to be able to make career advances and to be able to network with people. But then they go and they move and they live out in some different area, in some different space. They pay their taxes. They take money from here, then they pay their taxes to some different area, to some different city. If they engage into any type of excessive force that leads to some type of a lawsuit, the money is paid by the taxpayers here in Rockford. They don't contribute to that lawsuit money being paid. And then the same thing, they are in the process of carving out a life in another area as they come here. It's the ultimate concept that, Malcolm X used to speak about this, where people taking their dollar out of, that black people, he was speaking about black people and saying that the communities in which black people live, that they didn't even own the stores in the communities, that somebody who didn't live in the community owned the store in the community. And so when they went in there and spent money in the stores, that money was being taken to a different area of the community every time. So they couldn't even invest into the community if they wanted to, because all the money that they was giving to these people, they was taken to another place, to a different city. And I think that's the same thing has to be said about this when you speak about the miseducation, and when you speak about these people being in areas outside of Rockford. It's a reminder that resources are being drained out of Rockford for people who are not reinvesting those resources back into Rockford. If somebody's on the school board making decisions about the children within Rockford, and then they're leaving and their children are going to schools in Rochelle or in Rockton or in different areas, or to a private school within Rockford, and they and they aren't doing anything to better the public schools or better these communities, besides just advocating for the things that being the way that they want to. That's another form of resources being pulled out and not being put back in, because they're pulling out the resource of it's a word I'm looking for. Being, the idea of being able to decide your own destiny. These people, it should be people who have been to these public schools who are deciding these things. People whose children have to go to these public schools. They don't even have the option to send them somewhere else deciding these things. And the people who have decided to basically divest from the public school system here should have no kind of sway or no type of power over or authority over what is happening or what's not happening. And it's the same way for the policing of the community. If somebody is not invested enough in Rockford to live in Rockford, to live in the community in Rockford, to know the people in Rockford, but they're okay with getting a check, they okay with assaulting somebody or falsely arresting somebody, and then the city of Rockford having to pay for their mistakes, that's again an issue that we cannot continue to go on without speaking about. The issue that we can't continue to exist in the level in which it exists. And again, I'm not because we are abolitionists. We do believe in the abolition of police, but it also has to be understanding that steps have to be taken before we can get there. And an easy step to be taken is that anything that has to do with Rockford, it should be people who are in Rockford making the decisions, and people who are from Rockford and who have experience with Rockford making these decisions, because those are going to be the people who have the most interest in bettering Rockford. And again, when we say, I think another thing that we have to talk about is that when we say a lot of these things about being from Rockford and being in Rockford, yes, yeah, I'm not against the idea. Yeah, we're not against the outside of somebody, the concept of something. What's up, my man? What's that? I got this live going. I'm holla at you. All right, bet. Slide on me, bet. So I don't want people to think that we're saying, oh, nobody that's outside of Rockford can have anything to do with any decisions that's going on in Rockford. No. Yes, yeah, exactly, 100%. A fresh voice or a new voice is something that is 100% needed. But the problem comes when it's nobody who is connected to these issues there, or when the people who are connected to these issues are being drowned out by the outside voices or outside sources. And again, if the other problem comes when the people from the outside are not truly invested in building up Rockford or building up the community or the inside of Rockford. They're just concerned about how many more resources they can pull out of Rockford. I think another thing that we have to talk about is the idea that miseducating young people helps the school to prison pipeline, and that is a real thing here in Rockford. That's a real thing here in Winnebago County. I went to a private school in Rockford, and then went to a public school in Rockford, and there was a vast difference with.
Not to interrupt you, they have a school to factory pipeline, or school. Not to say anything's wrong with factory work, or a school to low paying job. School to crack dealer pipeline. School to gun dealer pipeline.
Yeah, 100%, and that is part of what miseducating. That's part of what miseducation does, and what part of what miseducation breeds is that when people are not properly educated, they don't have the. Certain people, they don't have the desire to do more. They don't have the desire to, or not even the desire, because using the word desire, I feel like is even almost disingenuous. If they don't have the opportunity, they don't have the scope. They're not told that they can be more. They're not told that they have the potential to be more. They're reminded regularly, whether that be through the fact that police are in the hallways, whether it be through the lockdowns that happen in schools, whether it be through, even just teachers. I went to a private school and a public school, and the manner in which the teachers are invested in the children are different. And again, I'm not sitting here, and I don't want this to be taken as me saying that there's no hope for anybody if you go to a public school and you have to go to a private school. Because again, I went to a private school from the first 7 years of my education to sixth grade, and then from seventh grade on, I went to public school, and I learned tremendously from both places. It's a different kind of learning. There's different things that you learn, but a lot of the things that take place in public schools lead towards building the mindset and the mind state of people being institutionalized. There's an institutionalization that goes on in public schools. There's an institutionalization that goes on when police officers walk the hallways with guns and with badges. There's an institutionalization that goes on where when a teacher has a problem with the student, they call the police to come and arrest the student, or when kids are getting arrested for being in fights. All of these things, or when parents are being truancy, and parents are having to go to court for truancy, and things are being taken into account, the family homes and the family dynamics. And so I think that all of those things are all factors that also go towards the city being ranking low in education. I think that one of the things that happens too often is people don't think about the fact that when you miseducate one generation, you by de facto miseducate the generation coming up, because you now have made it so that the father that you miseducated in some manner is going to, and this is not a definitive thing, but it is more than likely, if you miseducate the father, that it's going to be harder for the father to properly educate the son. Or when the son's going to school and getting the proper education, it may be a point where the father can no longer help the son. And so I just think that we have to be reminded that these issues don't just go away overnight. These things don't just disappear. That once you do things to a generation in the 70s, there's residual effects for the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. Once you do something to somebody in the 80s, there's residual effects through the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s. And to me, that's one of the things that I see when I see the miseducation, or when I see that the city is to be 130th in education, is the residual effects of constant miseducation throughout generations.
And one of the symptoms of racism, white cultural domination, whatever names, well, not whatever names. I say different things to try to clarify, make it more clear what we're talking about. But one of the things is, like, there's a organization, or there are some people in the community working to get more black teachers and administrators hired in Rockford public schools. But one of the reasons why that does not change the dynamic enough, if it changes it at all, is because even though you may have more black teachers, more black administrators, you still have a racist environment. For the teachers and the administrators, is a racist work environment. I know, I've been a substitute teacher in Rockford Public Schools, and it's not because of the parents or that the kids are bad or that it's dangerous or that I can't become a teacher in Rockford. Well, I don't know, but a teacher, is that I refuse to go and work in a racist work environment. I refuse to co-sign a racist work environment. And we have to come to that point. Instead of going out recruiting, saying you're trying to recruit more black teachers, more black administrations, destroy the racist work environment. The way that many of the racist teachers and administrators are behave without any check. I think just a couple years ago, we had a football coach, a white football coach at Auburn, body slammed a boy. You know, and his parents, of course, she reached out to the entities that she thought would help her, you know, different organizations, but she eventually found her way to more grassroots people, and people try to help her or whatever. But these are just instances and cases that show you. And Dr. Sheffield, before she left, you can Google this, before she left, one of the reasons why she said she was leaving Rockford Public Schools is she said she refused to be the superintendent of a school district that was going to be sued for racial discrimination. And that goes to the point where people were saying that it was just his job to erase the chalk, or that whole debate. You can refuse. Just imagine if all the black teachers, administrators, coaches, this, that, and the other said, we refuse to work for Rockford Public Schools. You're going to have to explain to the federal government why you can't get black teachers and black administrators. We can't just have black people working in the schools, you know. And then I would say I would refuse to work for a school district that doesn't have critical race theory as a part of the training for the teachers and the administrators. If you were to ask Aaron Jarrett, he could Google it now, but if you were to ask Aaron Jarrett, what is critical race theory? Right now, because, you know, like, he doesn't have to answer a question like that, you know, and he can continue to be in. And at one point, they were saying that the Rockford Public Schools was majority minority students. You know, depending on how they use the data, calculate the data, whatever. So that's the thing. Because if Rockford's, if the work environment, the whole environment of the schools is racist, you would be surprised at some of the things that white administrators and white teachers. I remember at West, they had a group of white teachers that had a letter writing campaign to try to get rid of the black principal that was there. And so as long as they're allowed to create and maintain a racist white environment in a school that is majority black, it's not going to do anything. That's what we talk about, abolish the racist system. It's not enough to put a black person as the principal. It's not enough to put a black teacher. It's not. Those things may help a few students, and we know this, and that's the point I wanted to get to too. If you were to do a survey of the top ranked educators and administrators in the United States, what percentage of them you think would be black or Hispanic or minority or Asian? And I wanted to make the point, in Seattle, which is like 1%, 1 to 3% black, they have an official position called the Black Education Administrator. The Black Education Administrator. Here they will call it something like minority and diversity or whatever. They're not, but in a city like Seattle, but that shows you the consciousness level. And that explains the reaction they had to George Floyd. You know, it is one of the places that could be viewed as a place that had one of the most transformative reactions to systematic racism and police terrorism. So that's the thing about this list. If you were to bring in some of the top If you were to bring in the top administrators and educators that could address the issues in Rockford, you would have to search all over the country. If you would have to bring in brothers from New York, but first of all, they wouldn't want to come here. They wouldn't put up. I remember I had a close friend. Actually, it was my sister. She was working in a school. She received awards as one of the top educators in Seattle. She came here to Rockford. She lived here in Rockford for a little while. She was working at Kennedy through a math and art infusion program, and she had her students draw their depictions of the murder of Trayvon Martin, I think it was. And so the students did this, and she had their pictures, their art displayed in public in the cafeteria. A white teacher, one with didn't even have 1/10 of the credentials that she had, told and got the pictures removed, saying that they were offensive. Now, the same school had pictures of all the black kids that had been killed by each other, hanging in the hallway. On display. What black person is quiet about being you? If you a black teacher in Rockford, you in that environment. And if we don't hear from you, you not saying nothing. And silence is betrayal. It's not enough for you to get your pension or whatever, to be the first black teacher at Nash Hold or whatever that is. We have to address. You can create an environment where a racist is uncomfortable in Rockford Public Schools. It's gonna take some fight. You might have to do an Occupy District 205. You might have to because the black teachers is no pass. In Chicago, they had thousands of them out in the street marching, saying no justice, no peace, so they can get a raise. Y'all haven't walked out, and y'all know that they refuse to teach the origins of racism or the history of race relations in America in the schools. And you haven't walked out, and that goes to what we talked about, the value system, the bad value system that we're passing down to the next generation. That if money, check a bag, fighting racism is bad for business. Fighting against racism is bad for business. When you're trying to buy up properties in Rockford and you're trying to operate a black business, it is bad for business. So be quiet, don't say nothing. That's so we got a lot of people or different things that are responsible for this list, but at the top, the root is racism, white supremacy, minority rule in the Rockford Public Schools. And it, like you said, this directly translates into the situation with the police. Because as Carter G. Woodson said, lynching begins in the classroom. The fact that you have, Eddie Patterson, it was the cop that was involved in the murder, Eddie Patterson, and there was another cop that was involved in the murder of someone on South Main. Both graduates of Hononegah High School. If you study the dynamics of Rockford, everyone talks about how racist of an environment that is. And so these things are directly correlated. And we like you said, we have to continue to have conversations and make sure that these conversations are being held.
100%. As you were speaking, I wanted to go and find that story. And so I do. This is actually I've never read this before. So this is from this is after Sheffield left. Dr. Sheffield. Yvonne Sheffield. This is after the superintendent left. This was in 2011. I want to read this quote from her, though. Let me see. Okay. Quote, I was hired as superintendent of Rockford Public Schools to be a change agent, and I'm proud of the change I've achieved. We have shifted the course of things and begun to make a difference, but we have not yet transformed into a world-class education system. We have not yet made Rockford schools the schools of first choice. Quote, while I still believe in the potential of Rockford and its schools, I also believe that change, by definition, means continuous forward motion. I cannot subscribe to hitting the pause button on change, much less going backward or rewinding. So unfortunately, I must end my tenure as superintendent. If I have shined a light on the need for change, then I'm content to have fulfilled an important purpose in Rockford. And so I think that is very apropos to any issue in Rockford. any issue, whether it be the issue of racism, whether it be the issue of miseducation, the issue of police terrorism, the issue of mass incarceration, the issue of poverty, the issue of addiction issues. In Rockford, historically, what they want to do is they want to hit pause or go. Let's take a few steps backwards so we can take a step forward, or let's give time, and that gets us into a place of things like the body cameras. The mayor pushed this idea of the body cameras was the reform that he wanted to make. This was the change that he wanted to make. And when you see that in the midst of those body cameras happening, because there was not an urgency to get it done immediately, because it was not an urgency to get it done now, since the first time the mayor of this city uttered the phrase of having body cameras, Denzel Duvant has been beat. If it was body cameras, we could have the video. It would be video evidence of that. Tyrus Jones was shot while running away. If it was body cameras, it'd be video evidence of that. And Jose Gonzalez Jr. was shot while running away. And if it was body cameras, it'd be video evidence of those things. And that is the process of forward progress. And when I hear forward progress, when I think about continuous motion, when I think about change being something that is regularly happening, it means that an issue cannot happen in January and then that same issue happen in April and the response to it is the same. It means that something it can't be a tenor or a certain type of tone to an issue in January, and then when April comes, the exact same tone is attached to that issue. It has to be ratcheted up. It has to be continuous. It has to be fluid, because that is what change is. That's the difference between, in my opinion, change and things like tokenism, or things like appeasement, or compromise. And so when you hear this woman say that she can't be here while the pause button is being pushed on change, while she can't be here while things are going backward, while things are rewinding, and this is in 2011, I make the same statement as to why we're here now, that we came once George Floyd, for May 30th for Facebook, May 30th for Lions. Yep, live, yep. And the same thing, appreciate it, brother. The same thing can be said about what she's saying about this right here. I believe that same thing has to be treated for this issue of police terrorism. And when people say things like, when are you going to go back inside, or when are you going to stop doing this, or this is, the voice is getting drowned out, or, basically all things that are basically saying that enough is enough. They've had enough. I think that if that mindset is the mindset of giving time, that mindset is the idea of taking a few steps back to take a few steps forward, which was even something that has been said to me multiple times before, where maybe you just take a few steps back and then you figure out a way to take a step forward, which I do think in some situations that is a true statement. Exactly why we can't wait. In some situations that may be true. It's sometimes in life where your girlfriend just broke up with you, somebody you love just broke up with you, you having a separation, the thing to do might not be to go outside her house and occupy the outside of her house and wait for her to come out and tell her how much you love her. That might be a time where you take a few steps back, try to see if you can take a step forward later. But the time to take a few steps back is not when people are being murdered, when people are being killed, and that is what is happening. I think that sometimes people think we may be engaging in hyperbole when we speak about this, but since George Floyd was murdered in Winnebago County, Sage was assaulted and beat by police, video cameras of this happening, and then falsely arrested. 50 plus people have been falsely arrested. Hundreds of people at protests last year were assaulted, had chemical agents used on them, were falsely arrested. Tyrus Jones was attempted to be murdered. Denzel Duvant, again, and this is not hyperbole, people have been beat less gruesomely than Denzel Duvant was beat and have died. It would not be any type of and again, I'm happy that Denzel Duvant did not die, but you cannot tell me that looking at that picture that the actions that were done to Denzel Duvant were not actions that could have led to his death. If me and Antar were to go and handcuff somebody and beat them right now to the point where they look like Denzel Duvant, we would not be charged with assault and battery. We would be charged with attempted murder. So that has happened. And then Jose Gonzalez Jr. has been shot, and Faustin Guaitigo has been murdered, and then it was a high-speed pursuit that led to the death of Raymond Jackson. These are all things that have happened. These are all life and death situations that have happened. These are all things who families have been involved. Countless these are thousands. This is thousands of people who are directly and indirectly affected by the things that we have just stated. So I do not believe that we are in a position in which we can wait, or we can give time, or we can take a few steps backward to take a step forward. I 100% believe that we cannot take any steps backward. We cannot relent at all. One of the things, one of my favorite speeches from Dr. King is his speech he gave the day before his death, the day before his assassination. They title it "From the Mountaintop." I've been to the mountaintop, and one of the things he says is the worst thing we could do right now in Memphis would be to turn around, or would be to stop here. We've come too far to stop here. And I agree 100%. Even in Rockford in 2021, we've come too far to stop here. We've come too far to retreat backwards, or to go backwards, or to regress. The work that was the work that was done by people on May 30th. I believe that on May 30th, the things that happened and the people that went out, the people who risked their livelihood, who risked their freedoms, who risked their bodies, they opened a door that had been closed here for a very long time. I watched as people were shot and murdered, and the same response did not happen. There has not been a response like May 30th since May 30th. There has not been a response like the die-ins that we did since the die-ins that we did. And so I understand how pivotal it was that people did come out in those moments. And I also understand how crucial it is that now that people have came out, what's up, man? Now that people have came out, now that this door has been opened, that we don't allow it to close again. That now that we've got a foot into the door and we're starting to pry the door open, we can't say, well, let's just rest. Let's let them go ahead, close the door. Let's rest up, and then we'll come back with a new plan to open the door up again. I don't believe that we can do that. I believe and a metaphor that you use all the time is that under regular circumstances, you stop at red lights, and you yield at the yellow lights, and you follow the rules of the road. But under emergency circumstances, you go through the red lights, you go through the yellow lights. You have to fly to where you're getting to. You have to have emergency and urgency to get to where you're getting to try to save people's lives, to save the person's life. And I believe that is what we're doing. There's no tangible way for us to know this, and there's no way that we will ever be able to know this. But I do believe that in some manner or another, the actions that we have taken have made it so one less person dealt with some type of police terrorism. One less person is dealing with mass incarceration. One less person is dealing with racial injustice. And one less family is dealing with those things. And I think another thing that we've done is that we've made it so that these people know that they're not dealing with these things alone. I do believe that in some of my, even us, at points in times, I felt as if, we can be out here and feel like, we're alone, or we're dealing with these things alone. And that is a very human element, and it's nothing. I don't think that that's a negative thing. It's a very realistic thing. But what has happened out here is that you can't be out here for too long and feel like you're alone. Even the times where there may not be an abundance of people out here, cars drive by, people saying what's up. People pull up and come up and walk and talk and want to have conversations about things. Family members and loved ones of the victims of police terrorism come out from time to time to check to see how people are doing, to leave things at the memorials, to have conversations. And we are getting to a place in which even on social media, there's not a day that goes by where there isn't some type of conversation around these issues. And I do believe that is the true first step. There can be no fast forwarding past that step. There can be no jumping over that step. We cannot get to any type of true abolition, true revolution, without an acknowledgement of not only what the issues are, but the damages that the issues have done. And that's not something that you do in a month or in 6 months or even in a year. In a year, there's hundreds of years in Rockford, hundreds of years. We might be speaking about the more recent 40, 50 years, but hundreds of years of these issues in some form or another of racism, being experienced here. We're not going to be able to eradicate that in a year. We're not going to even be able to have the critical conversation that needs to be had in a year, because another thing that has happened is that more things happen within that year. So as we're trying to reconcile things from 10 years ago or from 5 years ago and acknowledge things from 10 years ago and 5 years ago, there's still things happening now. As we're trying to fight for justice and fight for reconciliation and fight for Jovan Fresco, we're still dealing with Jose Gonzalez Jr. As we're trying to fight for justice and raise awareness to Mikey Guzman and what happened to Mikey Guzman, Faustin Guaitigo is still being murdered. And so I think that that's one of the other things that, I just want to point out is that, like she said here, there can be no pausing. There cannot be any slowing down. There can be no taking step backs to take step forward. We have to continue through whatever action possible to take, even if it's a small step forward, to take some type of step forward on a daily basis. Do you got anything you want to?
Yeah, and I think that one thing you had talked about before, that during the teach-ins that May 30th was doing, what interrupted the teach-ins? Murder. Yeah. So our efforts to systematically, I'm not saying that, don't want to use the term educate people like we some big, and I want to say that this is not a thing to try to personally attack people or just be throwing stones. This is for education and to demonstrate what critical analysis looks like. And that's what education is supposed to be, critical analysis, teaching people how to have a critical analysis, how to understand the world in which they live in. And that's what we said. The police that commit murder, the educational administrators and teachers that miseducate, undereducate, they depend on people not being able to do a critical analysis. Dr. Sheffield did a critical analysis of Rockford Public Schools, and she was chased out of town. She wasn't chased out of town by black people. Some black people co-signed or whatever. But for the most part, she was chased out of town by white racists. Some of these racists actually started an anti-racist group. But that ran this black woman who did a critical analysis. She said, what was the lawsuit said that Rockford had racism down to a science, right? Yep. She said that it's no longer a science, it's an art form now. This is your superintendent, so she had to go. When was the last time you heard the current superintendent, Aaron Jarrett, say something about racism in Rockford Public Schools? Rockford Public Schools should be engaged in a world conference on racism, like centered here. There should be a Rockford conference on racism, not just in the schools, but in general. And that's sort of the point. Without that type of urgent action, nothing is going to change. And if we don't push it, we can't say that we want to stop black on black violence. We can't say that we want to stop youth violence. We can't continue to ransom our youth over to the system. And that's the whole point about people willing to be complacent. And it has been studies or different things that show that the people that are most complacent are the people that's doing well in this system. The people that come to a march and go home, those are the people that are doing well in this system. And, and so that's the main thing, is to critically analyze. If Rockford Public Schools is not producing people that can critical, and why would you want people to critical analyze if you stealing money? Right. No, if the city has been caught stealing federal money, they stole Obama money, they stole TIF money, they stole Empowerment Zone money, they stealing weed money now. If you don't have anyone that can do a critical analysis, even if they have a degree, even if they have a PhD, where they're in Rockford, in many instances, you're being hired by these institutions because of what you don't know or what you're not willing to do. That you're not willing to risk that bag. You're not willing to risk those investment properties. You're not willing to risk that vacation to Cancun where you say, living my best life. You're not willing to do those things. They know this. They used to say in the 70s and the 60s, when black people would raise issues about racism on the job, your boss would ask you, And then didn't you just buy a new house out in Riverdale, Leslie? Is that your Cadillac out there? And you forget all of the grievances that you had. But that's the thing. May 30th Alliance, that there's a serious attempt to educate. This is not to just, but it's a critical analysis which is meant to productively address the issues that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that that's one of the things that there's been, and this is sort of veering off the specific topic that we were just on a little bit, but I think that there's been specific things that have happened since the occupation has been going on that have been very pivotal things, that not pivotal only because of the fact that they were done, but pivotal because of the implications that they have for being done and what happens with the repeating of them. And I think that one of those was putting the memorials up on Say Their Name Square. I felt that was something that it became and we're not always there for the conversations that happen from these memorials, but a lot of times I see people in families where they stop and they look at the memorials, or they stop and they talk about, I don't know what they talk about, but they stop and you can see them gesturing and pointing towards the memorials or looking at the memorials. When people pull up in the cars, when we still have the picture of Denzel, but people pull up in the cars and look at the picture of Denzel. And I think that putting these pictures and these names and these dates in which these things have happened have forced a critical conversation that we may not always be able to take part in, but I do believe that it has forced a critical conversation to happen just by people passing down these streets. I can't imagine how many groups of people that have passed by these streets and passed by to see the light poles and the memorials have had conversations afterwards about those things and what those conversations have been like. People pass by down here all the time, and every chance that I get, I try to tell them about the memorials and have conversations with them about the memorials. And so I think, and us as a organization, the destroying of the memorials, I believe, has led to a conversation. The city tearing them down has led to a conversation. When the police were coming and taking them down, that led to a conversation. And I think that part of us doing these live from Occupy City Halls and doing the podcast and speaking on these things is not allowing the conversation to not be critical, not allowing the conversation to go away. And so even though we may not be able to decide how each person has the conversation, we can decide that the conversation is not over with, that the conversation is not finished. So I think that the memorials and Say Their Name Square has been part of forcing critical dialogue and critical conversations that are necessary. And it's also made it so that these issues, not these issues, but these people and these events can't be forgotten or can't be pushed to the side. And I think that that's one of the things that the pamphlet has also been very been controlled. What's up, man? That's one of the things that the pamphlet has also been very good for. And we're working on a couple of more pamphlets to come out as well. But I also think that these lives that we've done and having these dialogues has been very impactful and been very pivotal as well, because of the different things that we've talked about. Because I think that in Rockford, Illinois, there has not maybe necessarily been a desire to speak about these things. A lot of these things, even for me, it was foreign that so many people were willing to have conversations in private and willing to have conversations in boardrooms and in meetings where the things said would never be heard by any other people, but they weren't willing to have those things publicly. They weren't willing to have those conversations with people around and with eyes around. And I believe that that has been something that has been instrumental in forcing and keeping this at the forefront of the consciousness, is that we're not having these conversations inside of City Hall, inside some room, inside some office, and nobody will ever hear about the conversations. Nobody will ever hear about these things. We're having these things out in the open. We're sharing the videos. We want people to watch the videos. We want people to be informed. We want people to engage in these conversations as well. And so I think that that has also been something that has been very pivotal in and keeping the conversation going and not allowing the conversation or this issue to go to the back of people's minds. And I think the same thing about the City Market protest, continuing to be at City Market through all the adversity that has been thrown our way has been something that has made it so that the conversation can't end, because people go to City Market and people then have to have a conversation about why these people are at City Market, or what these people are talking about at City Market, or why these signs are there. It's been I've been arrested on some of these Fridays, and one of the times I was arrested, we were at City Market, and people were passing by, and people were seeing us being arrested and in handcuffs, and people, whether it be negative detractors making comments or people who were in support of us making comments, it forced it so that the conversation continued. And the same thing with the chalk. Having the chalk written down makes it so that the conversation is forced to continue. Just recently, some man came out and watched chalk, and this man's whole family, after I shared the video of him washing the chalk away, this man's whole family basically had a family reunion gathering on my post, leaving comments saying that, trying to defend this man's actions. And so that lets me know that even the people who work inside this building, when they leave here, this conversation continues. And that is why we came to this specific area, and why we continue to be in this specific area, because this is the heart of this city, because the people who are at the top of these institutions see this as the heart of this city as well. And there's plenty of people who work inside this building and go home to Rochelle, go home to Rockton, go home to DeKalb, go home to these different areas. But when they go home, we have forced them to take these issues home with them. We forced them to take these issues to the bar with them. We forced them to take these issues to the club and to weddings and to churches with them. And the longer that we continue to do those things, I think we get to a place where you can no longer just have a shallow conversation about this. You can no longer just have an ignorant conversation about this. You no longer are in a place where people don't know about these things. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, good.
Actually, more importantly than just having the conversations, made it hard to not match your conversations with actions. Because a lot of people can, Malcolm X, I love Malcolm X, or you heard of Patrice Lumumba doing all of this, but then we see him in City Market drinking a Budweiser, or we see him doing things that show that they haven't, or that haven't had a critical analysis. Myself, I'm gonna say myself. I should be down here maybe relieving you time to time. I'm at home watching the game. But if you listen to my rhetoric, you would never knew that I skipped out on the occupation to watch the game. But I'm saying that to say, I'm not trying to say holier than thou. We all have to look at this. We all have to look at ourselves and say that this is a pandemic. Racism, white supremacy, 10% of the world's population ruling the whole world, not even strictly with military force, but with some type, immoral, fake moral, that we're the chosen or whatever they're using, or we're intellectually superior, and that's why we need to control you in the NBA. That's why we need to coach you, even though we can't do 90% of the moves that y'all do on the court. We need to be managing you. We need to organize you and put you in sets, and they know that racist image is going throughout the world. But that's one of the things I think May 30th is matching the action, or calling, and not just doing action, but matching the action with critical analysis and critical conversations and critical education. And one of the things that I know that May 30th has done, by calling the mayor racist, and not saying that is a personal, you made it clear it wasn't personal. That was a critical analysis of what racism really is. Because most people can't do a critical analysis of racism, because the schools don't teach us. We see on the comments them calling black people racist, or the people that's shining light on racism are racist, or the people that are mentioning racism is racist, or the people that say white people. White people itself is a racist term that was created by white people. So when we say we would love for that terminology to disappear, if the term white people disappeared, the so-called people that are considered white would be an obvious minority, because you would be grouped German, Irish, this, that, and other. You would no longer be the majority. But even, so let me, and just an example of how a critical analysis can justify the statement that the mayor is racist, that the police chief, or these different people. So when the mayor of Rockford, Illinois, I don't know what the size of the city is, a major, they saying is that Rockford is a major metropolitan city. You have a major metropolitan city where your top, what is the mayor is considered like the top, the executive, or he's the leader of your government, said that the root of violence is domestic violence. Let me show, that statement is racist. And the police chief supported it. No one called him out on it. Because what he's saying in essence is that the problems that we see in the streets with crime and violence starts in the home. That means that your problem is internal. It has nothing to do with our system. It has nothing to do with racism. The root of violence is domestic violence. That's racist, is incompetent, and it can only happen in cities where the population is under and miseducated. But at the same time that I say that, I think Rockford has an opportunity. We have an opportunity because Chicago is just as racist. The violence that you see in Chicago in the streets is directly tied to systems. Decisions that were made in the 60s. The decision to assassinate Fred Hampton Sr. when he had a formula for redirecting youth violence. The decision to run Dr. King out of Chicago when he had constructive activities to redirect the top gang leaders in Chicago to nonviolent black liberation work. There were the Chicago City Council, and I say all that about the Chicago to say they just have a more sophisticated cover-up. Rockford doesn't have to be sophisticated. So like you said, we have an opportunity, a unique opportunity to address these issues here, because they're not even sophisticated in the way they cover it up. They depend on our complacency and our willing to go along to get along. This false analysis that all we have to do is just like when you talked about how this area and Occupy City Hall and some of the Faust building, I would say, is a thorn in the side of the gentrification plan in downtown Rockford, because one of the false conceptions or analysis is that all we have to do is build like hipster nightlife, or and I hate to say this, but like a bougie black night experience, and that'll cover up for the need that your education system is one of the worst in the world, literally. And like you said, that's not being exaggerating, because if the United States ranks behind most of the developed world in math and science, and Rockford ranks behind most, you're one of the worst educational systems in the world, and so how does going to City Market, making political statements that you dare black people or other politicians or community leaders or whatever, going into City Market just to show that you support it and that you're going along with this whole narrative that all we got to do is put a pretty face, put lipstick on a pig.
Yeah. And even to add to that, to me that's the same thing that the murals that they're doing with these murals that they're putting up. To me, it's the same thing that they're doing with this $300,000 marketing campaign. They're going to give $400,000 to the affected, to help the communities that have been disproportionately affected by the drug war. And then they're going to spend $300,000 to try to get people to move to the city, as opposed to putting that $300,000 on top of the $400,000 and trying to deal with the people who already live in this city, who are living with disproportionate effects of the war on drugs, instead of putting all your money and all your efforts into fixing that issue, you're still trying to get people to move here. You're trying to get more people to come into this area, into this city, before you deal with the problems of the area and the city. And to me, that is, those are all things that exemplify the concept of not trying to putting the lipstick on the pig, of having the smoke and mirrors. It's a smoke and mirrors effect, where they want you to look over here, look at this hand, while they do something different over here with this hand. And so, to me, even just thinking about the fact that I think that they're getting ready to have this 815 day is coming up here, and they had again, this mayor has Tom has this thing where I don't know if he's almost addicted to press conferences, unless the press conference is about the issue of police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice. Again, they had a press conference somewhere down in I don't know what the exact area is, but is that Midtown? Is that what it's called? Out back over 15th Midway? Yeah. It was about the 815 day, but I can't think of what the area that they call. They call that area, it's M something. They call that area. But anyways, my point is that he had a press conference over there, and again, we're at a place where, since George Floyd was murdered, and after May 30th happened, he came out, he had a press conference on May 30th, he brought all these different black leaders out, or black community leaders, or black people in the community, prevalent black people in the community. He spoke about how he was listening to these issues, how he was informed, how he wanted to be informed about these issues, how he wanted to change some of these things. And then ever since that one press conference, every time there has been macro aggression, the same as George Floyd, where police terrorism and state sanctioned violence has reared its ugly head, there's been no press conference. There was no press conference when Tyrus Jones was shot. There was no press conference when Denzel Duvant was beat. No press conference when Jose Gonzalez Jr. was shot. No press conference when Faustin Guaitigo was murdered, which I'm sure he'll just put on Winnebago County and say Chiarelli should have to do it instead of him. And then no press conference after Raymond Jackson died in a high-speed pursuit. But you have a press conference in lieu of City Market happening. You come down and you have a press conference to tell people to come out to City Market. You have a press conference before before your 815 day, and before.
He had one about the 3-year-old girl, because that video.
Yeah. The same thing they had. They did talk about the 3-year-old girl after the 3-year-old tragically lost their life. That was used as a political ploy, political tool. The same thing when the mass shooting happened. He went down to Don Carter's and he was there and gave a speech and talked about being there. But just earlier, when it was,
sure they wouldn't lose any business.
Yep, made sure that he was there. Made sure. But when it was a mass shooting at the Amoco earlier that year, that same year, and again, mass shootings are defined as multiple people being killed. So at the Amoco, only one person was. I want to say only one person that was killed. That's not the proper terminology. Any life lost is too much life lost, which is my point, that this 5 people were shot, 1 person was killed. There was no press conference when that happened, and even then I think it would be disingenuous to have a press conference about that and not about police shootings. But again, it just points to where this person's intentions are, not intentions, it points to where this person's beliefs and ideology is at. And again, we've done a live where we did this, but we've went through and looked at the statements from that he made after George Floyd was killed, where he says George Floyd's name, where he calls for the officer to go to have punishment immediately, and then the statement that he made after Tyrus Jones was shot months later, where he does not say the name of Tyrus Jones, where he does not say anything about any type of justice being given, where he does not acknowledge the loved ones of Tyrus Jones, where he doesn't say that it needs to be a punishment urgently. He asks for the community to be patient and to wait. And the same thing, when Jacob Blake was shot, he came out and he did a little live video or a little video on his phone, and he spoke about having empathy for Jacob Blake's family and for the situation of Jacob Blake. But that was not what he said when Jose Gonzalez Jr. was shot, or when Denzel Duvant was beat. And so, that is the those are racist actions. Those are institutional racist actions. And again, when we speak about racism, we are speaking about institutional racism, which is the greater evil right now. Individual racism is not the greatest evil that is facing Rockford, Illinois right now. Individual racism is not what is leading to the miseducation. Individual racism is not what is leading somebody to say that domestic violence is the root of violence, which is redundant in itself. It's institutional racism that is. Yeah, 100%. All types of red, all types of red. And so, and again, those that I believe that in Rockford, at least, the individual follows their cues from the institutions. We've seen that with the chalk. The first time that the chalk was washed up was by the city of Rockford, and the city of Rockford did it multiple times. And then once the city of Rockford had did it so much that people had seen videos and driven by while it was happening, then individuals began to come and dump water out and try to wash it off themselves. The first people to tear down the memorials were not individuals. It was the institution. And individuals walked by the memorials for days. But the institution began to tear down these memorials. And then once the institution began to do it on such a regular basis, then the individual followed suit. And then the same thing when it comes to last year. The police criminalized and stigmatized these protests, and then that led to individuals coming in with handcuffs trying to make citizens arrest. Once the institution of the state's attorney and the institution of the Winnebago County Sheriff deputies and the institution of the Rockford Police Department, when those institutions got up and had a press conference and okayed a black woman being manhandled by an off-duty officer in plain clothes and by his son, who was a mall cop, I think, when they okayed those things happening, it gave the institution gave the okay to the individual that came the next week with multiple handcuffs trying to make citizens arrest, because the institution said it's legal to make citizens arrest, because the institution said it was okay for a citizens arrest to take place. And so, again, there's Tom McNamara, and individual racism is a very complicated thing as well, too, because individual racism can manifest itself in a myriad of ways. But am I sitting here saying that Tom McNamara is racist in the same manner that Bull Connor was racist, or that Tom McNamara is racist in the same way that a plantation owner was racist? No, I'm not saying those things, not because he's not, but because I don't know him individually in a manner to be able to make that statement. But institutionally, his political actions, and that's one of the things. If you haven't read How to Be an Anti-Racist, I would recommend reading the book. It was a good read, and it lets you understand the gravity of either being racist or being anti-racist. It lets you understand the gravity of racism being about the policies that you engage in, being about the ideology that you engage in, and the having memorials torn down in one specific area when you're not having those memorials torn down if everywhere in the city, every time they tore down these memorials and these pictures that were up here, they went and tore down all the rest of them, and every time they find us, they find everybody else, and every time they came and washed down chalk off over here, they went to all the other sidewalks in the city, made sure there was no chalk, and washed them off. We would get into a place where it would become harder to make the argument that it is institutional racism that's leading to them doing that. And the same thing, if these were if the memorials here were predominantly white or majority white, if the messages being written were about people who are predominantly white or majority white, if even the people participating, because again, I don't know how many people's are informed about the racial makeup of the May 30th Alliance or the racial makeup of the people participating in these things, but the racial makeup is more non-white than white. It is more people of color than it is white people, as I'm speaking about the occupation, and I'm speaking about outside of City Hall and the things that are happening directly with City Hall and the May 30th Alliance. And so even all of these things point towards institutional racism. The fact that the people who are being advocated for are predominantly of color, the people doing the advocating are predominantly of color, the people that are struggling against them are predominantly not of color, and the issues that are being spoken about are issues that predominantly affect people of color. All of those things are why institutional, or why we say that these are racist actions. That is what institutional racism looks like. And so I think that again, and this is probably a conversation that would be good to have on another live where we just sort of dive deeper into the different kind of concepts of institutional racism. But one of the last things I want to say, at least on this topic, is that we have to operate in Rockford from the standpoint that there is not three sides, because right now that's how it's being looked at. It's being looked at as just three sides, as you can be racist, anti-racist, or neutral. And in reality, being neutral is being racist. It works towards the behest of the racist. It does not work towards the behest of anti-racism. And so we have to get into a place where people are either racist or anti-racist. And so it's not a place where, well, I support what you're doing, I just don't support the way in which you're doing it. If you support the ending of police terrorism, then you support the actions that are being taken to end police terrorism. If you support the ending of mass incarceration, you support the actions that are being taken to end mass incarceration. One of the things, if you support the ending of racial injustice, you support the actions that are being taken to end racial injustice. Before I pass it to Antar to see if he had for anything else that he would want to add, I want to say that I think about often one of the things Malcolm X said was that. And this was at the time when the segregation of schools and the segregation of public facilities was a struggle that was being had heavily. And Malcolm X said that I'm not for segregation. It's not that I'm for segregation or I'm for separation and you're for integration. We're both for freedom. We just have different ways of going about getting that freedom. We have different beliefs on how to get to that freedom. And I believe that is something that when people genuinely are on the side of freedom and genuinely on the side of justice, and genuinely are on the side of life, because that is what at the core of all of these things that we're speaking about, is that life is being lost on an hourly basis, on a regular basis in this city. Even at times where it may not manifest in someone being shot or someone being killed, the steps are being taken to lead to that loss of life. And so if you are in agreement with those things ending, then you're not nitpicking about chalk. You're not nitpicking about language. You're not nitpicking about memorials. You're not nitpicking about sirens. You're not nitpicking about megaphones. And I think that another one of the things that is very unique about Rockford in comparison to some other cities or other places in time is that sometimes there's this book that we haven't got to read yet that I need to finish, this Dr. King book so I can read this book next. But it's this book that's titled In Defense of Looting. And I believe that it is a much harder conversation to have when stores are being burned down, when things that when property is being destroyed, when, a lot of these things that happened before, people have died and people have been killed, or people have been, citizens or civilians are fighting with each other. There's manners, I'm bringing this up to say that there's manners in which this same type of struggle can be more divisive and can be harder to have conversations about. And it can be in a place where people feel as if they agree with the end goal, but they don't agree with the objectives, and the conversation is harder to have. But that's not even the case here. People aren't here disagreeing over whether looting is a defensible form of protesting or not. They're arguing if whether chalk is a defensible form of protesting or is a valid form of protesting. They're not arguing whether setting fire to buildings and institutions that have emanated oppression and exploitation is the right thing to do. They're arguing of whether having a megaphone is okay, if whether having a siren on a megaphone is okay. They're arguing if having pictures of people who have been murdered being put up is okay. And so so you cannot be on the side of justice and have an issue with chalk, or have an issue with language, or have an issue with the memorial, or have an issue with sirens and megaphones. And we have to get to a place where people understand that the people doing the oppressing, the people doing the exploiting, the people, or even the people benefiting from the oppression and exploiting, cannot be the people who lay down the ground rules on how to end the oppression and how to end the exploitation. If it was up to the city of Rockford, there's no protest that Tom McNamara will find legit or will find okay. Because when people walked on the crosswalk, he had them arrested. When people sat in chairs, he had them arrested. When people used megaphones, he had them arrested. When people put up pictures, he had them arrested. When people wrote in chalk, he sent people out to wash it off. And so when he came out a year ago and said he agrees with peaceful protests, the same thing a year ago, so many white people were saying that they agree with peaceful protests. White people and black people were saying, but majority white people were saying they agree with peaceful protests. They have no issue with peaceful protests, and trying to point to Dr. King or point to the SCLC, point to all these different entities and say that this is the way that you should protest. This is how you should do things. And in this city specifically, we have had some of the most passive protests and some of the most and again, I don't like to even use the word passive or nonviolent or peaceful because of the way that is manipulated. But for this conversation, I'll use it. There's very few things you can find as peaceful as walking on a crosswalk. They arrested us for it. Very few things you can find as peaceful as sitting down in a chair. I remember when we were laying down in the street, somebody said, "Why don't you do something peaceful like do a sit-in?" And since we've done the sit-in, I've been arrested more times doing the sit-in than I was arrested for laying down in the street. And again, more people have been, and even if you think about this, more people have been arrested for walking on a crosswalk than got arrested on May 30th, then got arrested for whatever may have happened on the nights after May 30th. And so to me, all of those things are reminders that it is not the manner of the protesting that people are taking issue with. It is what is being protested, and it is who's protesting, and it is the fact that any protest is happening at all. It is genuinely people who feel, and this is a strong feeling, that how dare you protest when you live in America? How dare you protest when you don't have to, when you're not a slave? You know, how dare you protest when you can go and sit down in a restaurant? How dare you protest when all of these other things have been changed, when all of these other things have been altered? And that is, the same thing that they had for Colin Kaepernick when Colin Kaepernick took the knee. There is a very sizable portion of America and of Rockford, because Rockford is a microcosm of this country, which feel like you not being hung, you not being killed in my direct line of sight. They almost feel as if, since you have the right to protest, you shouldn't protest, because the people who should be protesting is people who don't have the right to protest, and so I just think that all of those things are things that, each one of those things deserve their own conversation. But those are just, as we sort of get to the end of talking about all those things, these are some of the things that just are all coming to the forefront of my mind.
Yeah, and that brings it, around again to the urgency. And now that's really what bothers people about the protest. How dare you be out there that long? How dare you be out there when the Super Bowl is on? How dare you withdraw from chasing materialism, and how dare you not be concerned about buying some new Air Jordans? How dare you?
What up, man?
How dare you create a platform or an environment that is friendly? You create an environment that's not telling youth that they're the problem. You create a situation where you're addressing the system itself and not symptoms. And I think that the thing that May 30th have demonstrated, and other community groups in Rockford, or organizations that I don't know how they would categorize themselves. But and sticking with the urgency of now, the fierce urgency of now, where people are willing to divest in certain lifestyles, are willing to divest from certain institutions, are willing to divest. We can't even get people to divest from city market. And let me tell you how divestment is what made the Montgomery bus boycott work. And when cities like Detroit, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., when they got their first mayors, corporations, sports teams, major businesses and industries, they divested from those cities. This is documented. The white power structure, in order to psychologically and materially and make it look like black people couldn't govern. This is what happened if you get a black mayor. This is what happened if black people were governing themselves. The city went down, the infrastructure went down, crime rose, the educational system went down, all when a black man was in office. But if you don't do a critical analysis, you won't know that corporations, institutions systematically divested their money. They took their money. The Detroit Pistons moved out of Detroit. The Lions moved out of Detroit. Car companies, they moved out of Detroit, and when the black mayor was gone, they came back. You know, it was talked that certain corporations or certain rich people took their money out of the economy when Obama was president. You know, and then there was a big boost in the economy when Trump came. They had put their money, and I'm saying that to say we have to do that. We have to be willing. We have to. Do you really have a problem with black on black crime? What they call black on black crime? Do you think that divesting in the Bears is? Do you dislike black on black crime enough to divest from the Cubs? Do you dislike black on black crime to disinvest in the Bears? Because how do you look when black youth look at us? If my child or your child came to you and said, I'm being abused or I'm being threatened, my life is at stake, would you say, okay, yeah, that's messed up, I'm gonna make a Facebook post, but the Bears coming on, the Cubs coming on? Or if I'm locked in a prison, or I've been kidnapped and I'm locked in a building, and I'm being kidnapped and I'm being abused, I'm being this. Do you think that I mind people outside the window saying, "Fuck that kidnapper, fuck the abuser"? I'm happy, and you would be happy too. What action would you think was too extreme to rescue you from that situation? And we have to have that approach, even though, like I said, even some actions we may engage in, we might think like, man, in the long term, what would be the consequence of that? You know, was that a short-term victory, or was that a long-term victory? But at any case, you would want any action that could rescue you from that situation and keep you from that situation. You think you would be worried about chalk? You think that you would be, what would you think of the people who thought that City Market was too great to miss? A business opportunity at City Market was too great to miss. Yeah, we can stop you from being abused, kidnapped, killed, raped, this, that, and other. But City Market got some, they gonna let me have a booth. And then you want young people to respect you, or you want to come before young people, or you want to get a grant to say that you're going to help to reduce youth violence. We have to be willing to take it to that level. Dr. King proved that. He put action to those words, the urgency of now. In 1967, he was preparing for the Poor People's Campaign. The Poor People's Campaign was, you see how the, what do they call them, the white racists or the Trump followers that invaded the Capitol? I was more shocked at black people being shocked. I saw a black person post on Facebook, "Oh, pray for us now, they invaded the Capitol." You didn't think that when they killed Trayvon Martin? You didn't think that when they killed Tamir Rice, you thought these people who thought their rights had been violated. I'm not telling you to invade the Capitol, but Dr. King was talking about invading the Capitol non-violently. They were talking about camping out in Washington, D.C. indefinitely. This is, you can go do the research on it. And he was betrayed. The black community was betrayed. Black youth was betrayed by all people who turned on the Poor People's Campaign to pursue things that will help them, things that basically help the black middle class. Dr. King realized that a lot of the things that had been passed, you know, in 63, 64, 65, the poor black people and the poor masses of the United States were left out. You know, and so, you know, that's the thing. People say, you know, they want to hear more about solutions, resolution. I even saw a flyer in Chicago. It disturbed me. The flyer in Chicago said they're having a discussion about stopping youth violence, solutions only. And my thing is that would be good if I know that you did a critical analysis of the problem first. You know, it's like saying surgeries only, no x-rays, no diagnosis of your problems. We only do surgery when you come in here. And that's what tends to happen. But that being said, the solution is for us to realize the fierce urgency of now, that our actions must match our understanding how serious this one black youth shot dead in the street, and then, like, you know, a proper investigation is not done, no resolutions for the mother, no resolution for the family. That's enough to get us. We all should be camped out here. I ain't gonna even front. I slept out here a few times, but I haven't. I'm still having to step up my actions behind this rhetoric. But we all have to do that. That's the only solution. Having champagne and cheese on the dock, you know, promoting black bourgeoisie, metropolitan, trying to paint this metropolitan black middle class face and gloss over racism and the work that we got to do. That's not it. Don't tell our youth that. And that goes to the point that we talked about of the value system. The value system. What do we value? We don't value. And an example that I give, and then I'm past the mic, is that it dawned on me that we had been saying Black Wall Street was bombed. And it turns out 6 city blocks were bombed. Why, what about the mentality that we have that the only thing that registered to us that black businesses was destroyed? Have we sunken that low? Not the lives that were lost. 6 city blocks. Not black Main Street, because it wasn't a Wall Street. America, don't disillusion yourself. America is not letting you set up no Black Wall Street in America. You've never done it. We've never done it. The Wall Street trades in international goods and raw materials and corporations. Having a library, a bank, and a school, that's great. And we can do that. We can build a Wall Street. I'm not saying we can't. But stop disillusioning our youth by having them think that they built a Wall Street in America, like America let them build a Wall Street. And I say that to say the MOVE organization was bombed, but it don't receive the attention of Black Wall Street because our value system. And if you teach the youth, even if we try to teach the youth positive, legal, and constructive ways to achieve financial security, or now the new buzzword is generational wealth. Even if we did that, this system is set up so that only a small minority can achieve certain levels. And so when these young people realize that they can't achieve those levels legally, they're going to turn to illegal ways. And then when your car gets jacked, when someone steals your shoes, or when someone shoots at you then it's an outcry. But the value system came from the society.
Yeah, 100%. I think the phone getting ready to die here a little bit. I should have it charged a little bit more, but we just get ready to wrap this one up the way that we wrap all the rest of them up. I want to encourage people to share this video, to watch this video. I want to encourage people to go back and watch the other lives that have taken place. One of the things we're going to start doing is chopping up clips. I think I think. But we already put out one clip of from the 4th of July conversation, but we're going to start clipping all of these things up and putting out little portions and clips, so that way if people don't have the time to listen through an hour or 2 hours of the video, they can watch through clips where we're talking about specific things. So look out for that. Again, we continue to engage we continue to host the Food Truck Tuesdays protest at Nicholas Conservatory. We continue to host the occupation at City Hall 24/7 down here at City Hall in Rockford, Illinois. What up, what up? And we also are continuing to host the protest at City Market every Friday. So we want to encourage people to don't come out to City Market to participate at City Market, but come out to City Market to participate in the protest. We have pamphlets out there, business cards, different members of the organization, different members of the community who are all informed about these issues and willing to talk and have conversations with people. And so we want to end this one by saying, rest in power to Mark Barmore. Rest in power to Demetrius Bennett. Rest in power to Jovan Fresco. Rest in power to Kerry Blake. Rest in power to Logan Bell. Rest in power to Geno Washington. Rest in power to Philip Johnson. Rest in power to Jasper Banks. Rest in power to Faustin Guaitigo. Rest in power to Shannon Graves. Rest in power to Mikey Guzman. Rest in power to Eddie Patterson. Rest in power to Joseph McCormick. And rest in power to Little Mike Sago Jr. We outside.